Hey, amazing viewers. I love connecting with all of you from around the world. Stay with me until the end, because this story is packed with surprises that will leave you inspired and thinking differently. Today's twist is something no one saw coming. And if it's your first time here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Show some love by liking the video. And don't forget to share it with your friends. What if the kindness you offered today became the very thing that turned the world against you tomorrow? Marcus Daniels, a decorated veteran, was no stranger to the weight of misjudgment. Yet, no one could have predicted how a simple act of compassion could spiral into a life-changing ordeal. It was a peaceful morning, the kind where the air feels crisp and the world moves at its own pace. Marcus, a man with a heart of gold, laced up his running shoes like he had done countless times before. His mind, always sharp and focused from his military days, was ready for another jog through the serene neighborhood park. Lakeside Heights, where lawns were pristine and smiles were polite, seemed like the perfect place for someone like him to start over. But beneath the surface of this picturesque community lay something far more complicated. Marcus, ever aware of the world's tendency to misread him, couldn't escape the feeling that people here still saw him differently. The town might have claimed to be inclusive, but Marcus had learned that inclusivity doesn't always mean acceptance. He had walked these streets for months, greeting neighbors with a polite smile, but always sensing the distance in their eyes. It was the kind of distance that never fully erased the suspicion. It simply disguised it under the guise of good intentions. That morning, as Marcus rounded a corner of Lakeside Park, a sound pierced the quiet. A child's sob. It was raw, desperate. His training in security, his instincts from years in the military, made him pause. Most would have kept running, thinking the sound would resolve itself, or maybe assuming the child was with someone else. But not Marcus. Something about the cry pulled him in. It wasn't the child's tears that he couldn't ignore. It was the isolation, the absolute solitude in her sobs. The child, no older than 6 or 7, sat on a bench, her small frame hunched as she clutched a worn stuffed rabbit in her arms. Her pale face was streaked with tears, her blue eyes wide with fear. For a moment, Marcus hesitated. He had lived enough life to know what this could look like. A black man approaching a crying white child in the park. The whispers that would follow, the accusations, the suspicion. He had faced it before in subtle ways, sidelong glances, people crossing the street when he walked too close, security guards following him around stores. The world had already decided what he might be capable of. So why take the risk? Yet, the child's vulnerability was too much for Marcus to turn his back on. It wasn't just the child's loneliness that struck him. It was his own deep need for human connection, the bond that comes when you simply choose to show up for someone in need. So he slowed his pace, his jog becoming a walk as he approached her, taking care to respect her space. He kept his hands visible, his posture non-threatening, his voice gentle. "Hey there," Marcus called softly, keeping several feet between them. "Are you okay? Where's your mom or dad?" The little girl looked up at him. Her initial surprise was evident, but it wasn't fear. There was something else, something almost like relief in her eyes. She had no one else to turn to. "I can't find my mommy," she hiccuped, her small voice shaky. "We were walking and I stopped to look at a butterfly, and then she was gone. I don't know where I am." Marcus took a deep breath. This wasn't just any lost child. This was a human being in distress, alone in a world that had too often overlooked her needs. "That's scary," he said, his voice full of understanding. "My name's Marcus. What's yours?" "Emma," she replied, her grip tightening on her stuffed rabbit. "Mr. Flopsy." "Well, Emma," Marcus continued, smiling warmly, "we're going to find your mommy. Is it okay if I sit down here with you while we wait?" Her little face brightened, and for the first time since he'd approached, her sobs slowed. "Mr. Flopsy says you seem nice," she said, a small, hopeful smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you, Mr. Flopsy," Marcus replied, returning the smile. For the next few minutes, Marcus reassured Emma, taking her mind off her fears, helping her recall her mother's name, her appearance, anything that might help locate her. He even called the park's security to make an announcement, as he knew that doing so was the best way to help Emma feel safe and to find her mother quickly. But as he sat there with the little girl, waiting for her mother to arrive, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. What should have been a simple, compassionate act was about to become something entirely different, a test of character, a trial of public perception. The deeper question began to surface in Marcus's mind. Why does helping a child have to come with so many risks? And just like that, as if on cue, the world's judgment began to descend. The storm was about to hit. The mother, Catherine Whitley, arrived in a rush, her face a mixture of panic and relief. But as soon as she laid eyes on Marcus, everything shifted. The concern that had been etched on her face just moments before gave way to suspicion. The relief that her daughter was safe became clouded by doubt. A simple, selfless act was now shrouded in a dark fog. Was Marcus a threat? Marcus had lived his life understanding that there was a world of difference between what you know to be true and what others believe to be true. He was all too familiar with the quick judgments, the glances that lingered a moment too long, the assumptions that people made when they didn't understand who he really was. But he was no stranger to suspicion. It had followed him since childhood, a constant companion, casting a long shadow over every good intention, every smile extended, every offer of help. He had learned to live with it, to anticipate it, but it didn't make it any easier when it came crashing down in an instant. When Catherine's voice sliced through the air, the questions that followed were like daggers. Who are you? Her words weren't just cautious, they were accusing. What are you doing with my daughter? Marcus stood frozen for a moment, the familiar weight of misunderstanding settling over him like a heavy cloak. His hands remained visible, his posture was as neutral as he could make it, but the air around him seemed to thicken with every second. He knew what this looked like to Catherine, to the onlookers who had begun to gather. He could feel their eyes on him, silently questioning his every move. He wasn't just a man trying to help, he was a black man, and to some, that was enough to make him guilty of something he hadn't even thought of doing. I'm Marcus Daniels, he said, his voice calm and steady, despite the roiling storm inside him. I found Emma crying and alone. I called the park security to help find you. I didn't do anything wrong. But his words, clear as they were, fell on ears already deafened by fear and suspicion. Catherine's eyes narrowed. Why didn't you just call the police? She demanded. Why were you sitting with my daughter? The words stung, not because of the question, but because of what it implied, that Marcus's intentions were somehow sinister, that his presence with her child was not only unwelcome but dangerous. It was a question that many of Marcus's black brothers and sisters had heard too many times before. Why don't you just stay away from people who don't look like you? The crowd around them began to grow, whispers rippling through the air like a wave, and soon the tension was palpable. Catherine's voice was rising now, her suspicions escalating as she pointed her phone at Marcus, recording his every word, as if to capture the very evidence of his guilt. I'm recording you, she announced coldly. What were you really doing with my daughter? How do I know you weren't trying to lure her away? And there it was, the accusation that too many people like Marcus had faced. The accusation that their mere existence in the space of others was enough to provoke fear. The idea that being black, being different, made them an automatic suspect. It was a terrifying thought, one that Marcus had lived with for years, knowing that one wrong move, one misstep, could lead to a life turned upside down. But in that moment, something deep inside Marcus hardened. He wasn't going to let the storm of suspicion drag him down. He wasn't going to let the narrative be written for him without speaking his truth. He was used to people not trusting him, but he knew that the truth would eventually surface. It always did. Just then, Emma, the very child that Marcus had helped, spoke up. Mommy, he was nice to me. she said, her voice small but resolute. "He helped me find you." The weight of Emma's words was more powerful than anything Marcus could have said. Here was a little girl, confused and scared, yet still able to see through the fog of fear and recognize kindness when she saw it. But Catherine, still gripped by suspicion, didn't listen to her daughter. She pulled Emma closer, as though trying to shield her from the truth that was standing right in front of her. As the confrontation continued, a park security officer arrived, his radio in hand, and the tension shifted. The officer, after assessing the situation and confirming Marcus's story through the park's security logs, finally cleared him. The announcement system, which had been down for maintenance, was verified, and the officer explained that it was protocol for Marcus to stay with Emma until her mother arrived. Yet the damage had already been done. Catherine's suspicion, her judgment, had already planted seeds that would grow in the minds of those who were watching. The truth no longer mattered. Perception had already taken its hold. But Marcus had learned something crucial that day. He had learned that no matter how clear the truth was, no matter how right you are, the world would still cast judgment based on what it wanted to believe. The truth might clear your name, but the stain of suspicion is far harder to wash away. And yet, as the situation unfolded, a powerful lesson emerged. The simple act of a child's trust, the hug Emma gave Marcus before running back to her mother, was a reminder that the purity of human connection, the simple recognition of good intentions, transcends all else. In that moment, despite the crowd, despite the accusations, Marcus knew that some truths couldn't be erased. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to see the truth in you when the world refuses to. But was that enough? Could it stop the wave of judgment that was already swelling in the court of public opinion? Would the truth ever be enough to quiet the voices that were already shouting from the rooftops? Or was this just the beginning of a much longer battle? Sometimes, the hardest battles aren't fought in the courts or on the streets. They are fought within the heart. Marcus Daniels had known that truth his whole life, but today it felt different. Today, he had been on the front lines of an invisible war, one that too many people like him had fought for centuries. It wasn't just about being accused. It wasn't even about being misunderstood. It was about something far deeper, something that had been woven into the fabric of society for far too long: the fear of the other. As Marcus jogged away from Lakeside Park, the weight of the confrontation still lingered. His body, built for strength, was tense as his mind raced through the events that had just unfolded. He'd done everything right. He'd approached the child with respect, called the park security, and patiently waited for the mother to arrive. Yet, when Catherine had arrived, it wasn't gratitude that met him. It was suspicion, the kind that came from a deep-seated fear, a fear that he knew too well. A fear that saw his skin, his presence, and turned it into something monstrous, something dangerous. But even as Marcus felt the sting of that accusation, a part of him refused to be crushed by it. A part of him understood that the battle wasn't lost. It had just begun. His name might have been smeared in that moment, but the truth had its own way of making its presence known. And truth, no matter how hidden beneath layers of fear and ignorance, would eventually rise to the surface. The incident at the park would spread like wildfire, and the internet, with its vast reach, would fuel the flames of judgment. The video would be shared, dissected, and twisted to fit the narrative that people wanted to believe. Yet Marcus understood something fundamental. The truth is always more powerful than any opinion, no matter how loud or widespread. The world might be quick to judge, but there are those who see beyond the surface. There are always those who will fight for justice, who will stand in the face of misunderstanding and say, "This isn't who I am." And the more Marcus thought about it, the more he realized that this story wasn't just about him. It was about all of us. It was about how we view one another, how we judge based on appearances, on assumptions, on the invisible lines that society has drawn for us. It was about how easy it is to cast someone aside, to accuse them of something they didn't do, simply because they don't fit into the mold of what we expect them to be. But what if, just for a moment, we chose to see people for who they truly are? What if we took the time to look beyond our fears and biases and chose to believe in the good in others? Marcus didn't have to be a hero, and he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. His actions spoke louder than any words could ever express. In a world full of noise, his quiet act of kindness was a beacon, a reminder that not all heroes wear capes. Some heroes simply show up, no matter the cost. The road ahead for Marcus wouldn't be easy. He knew that. The damage done by public suspicion and online mob mentality would be hard to undo. But one thing was certain: he would not let fear dictate his actions. He would continue to walk the path of kindness, even when it felt like the world was set against him. Because in the end, the truth always has a way of cutting through the lies. And this is the question we must all ask ourselves. What kind of world do we want to live in? A world where fear divides us, or a world where we choose to see the humanity in each other, no matter our differences? The choice is ours. The power lies in our hands. So ask yourself, will you be a part of the problem or part of the solution? Will you allow fear and suspicion to dictate your reality, or will you choose to believe in the power of kindness, understanding, and the strength of truth? The world is watching. Will you rise to meet it?